What kind of a snake was it?
That was a northern ringneck snake. We found a lot of snakes this week. That was a really unique, pretty little snake.
Andrew would have taken it off your hands. He would have been happy with it.
Yeah. We're getting really good at finding snakes.
Is that on purpose?
It is on purpose. I mean, we've had a lot of practice at it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody.
Morning.
How are we?
Good morning.
Hello.
Almost afternoon. Everybody's hopping on.
Not here.
Well, that's right. Good morning to you.
9 o'clock.
Early. Gustavo's 8. Welcome, everybody. All right. Who do we have here? Raymond, welcome. John, Kent. How's everybody doing?
Doing well.
Doing terrific.
We're well.
All right. That's what I want to hear.
Good.
All right. Let people hop on. It's Greg. Ben's on. Rachel. Gustavo. All right. Let's get moving. Let's get started. Dive right in. Who's got questions for us before we dive into any particular topic? Come on. I'm going to have to plant somebody in the future so we have a first question to lead things off while we stare at each other. Come on.
What's a podcast?
What's a podcast? All right, let's get started on the What's a Podcast class. Who was that? Ken Hoops. What's up, Ken Hoops? You're muted.
I like the cool little, he's got some sort of graphic there. That's pretty cool.
That's when I'm spying on my instructors teaching classes.
Yeah, what is that thing?
It's just a karate gi emoji.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. What's up, Ken Hoops?
Not much. Time to learn about some podcasting. I've never been a guest on one, but I've heard about them on TV.
Are you looking to do it? I mean, you've got so much that you can...
now that we have the online trial that people could do from anywhere, I think it's at least a good opportunity to build awareness, even if I'm giving it away for free.
Oh, without a doubt, it's one of the best. Who here has done multiple podcast guesting episodes? Greg, Corey, John. All right. If you have, give a take on what it's done. Greg, let's hear from you. What has it done? Anything to help? What has it done to help your business?
When I was the editor of RV Daily Report, I had a podcast, and it really helped build my credibility within the industry as a journalist. I was the first one in the RV industry to actually put a podcast together. So people were clamoring to get on board to get the information out, because what I saw podcasting as is the ability for people to tell their own story in their own words, their own way, and without an editor or a filter or anything like that, and people loved it.
What about the idea of like guesting? I want this to get out there more, because everybody's got an expertise in their own field, and I think this is so undervalued, and that's why we're doing this as a theme this month. It's so undervalued. I mean, Rachel, I know you've been on a bunch. I'm not sure if you could talk, but I just want to bring awareness to this a lot more, because I think we're missing out on a lot of opportunities. And even as we're doing the lessons, there's not as many. I don't think there's as many questions as I'd like to hear, because I think there's. Elaine, I want to ask you, because I know you're in this world. Like, what is your take on this?
Well, it's interesting because I've, hosted, I don't know how many interviews, either on public radio or podcasting. And so I've been on that side. It's sort of like you being on that side of the camera. But I haven't guested that much. I was a guest on a podcast recently. I'm going to be a guest on Jody Krangel's podcast next Monday. And I have to say, it makes me nervous to be on the other side.
Totally.
And so, I'm really interested in what you have to say and what other people have guested a lot have to say.
What are you nervous of?
Go ahead. Well, one thing that I'm nervous about is that we built a really nice studio in an extra room at Lindsay's house, and I can't go to it. So I don't have good equipment here. as you can see,
Okay.
and so I have to, I have odds and ends, and I've got to put it together in my closet so that I can get good sound. So I'm nervous about that. And I get that question a lot, like, what's the best way to do remote recording? But what else am I nervous about? I guess it forces, as a guest, I think it forces you to know what your message is. And you might have different messages for different audiences,
Totally.
but you really need to be clear before you go on and be a guest, not just have a good conversation, because some of us are good conversationalists no matter what, but to make it worthwhile for everybody.
To have a real takeaway from what you're talking about.
To have a real takeaway from what you're talking about, and the lead gen, having a clear, like, what you want to get out of it. I'm just not prepared. I've been, just keeping up with what's in front of me the last 6 weeks.
What's great about the podcast guesting, and this is a theme, and this is to pay attention to, it really is it's where the rubber meets the road in terms of the other things we've been talking about over the last couple of months, which is building an email list, building an opt-in, having all that type of stuff, because you can, I don't want to say it's a waste, but you can go on a show and you could not have the opt-in and you could not have all these things set up. And I did in the very beginning, and it made for great conversations, but man, were there a lot of missed opportunities for people to connect with me afterwards or to keep up with what we're doing. So all this stuff, this is why we waited on this one, because, and depending on how you go through in terms of the audio lessons, it's like when you have all that stuff in place, when you have your message, when you have your network built, right? If you go through Build Your Powerful Network and you now rethink that just in terms of the podcasting world, it changes, it niches down even building your powerful network. And I hope it starts getting through. Corey, what's your take on this? I know you've done some of this.
Yeah, well, I've only done a handful, but I would say there was a couple things that really stand out to me. First is the network effect that by far it gets you way outside of your own personal network, because you're on a show that obviously has people that are nowhere in your network, most likely. And in my case, when I was on Andy Storch's show, it led to, a friendship that led me to this group. So I think both from building your own network and also getting outside of your network, there's benefits on both sides of that. The second is, I'm amazed at the long tail that the podcasts have. In particular for me, I was on a show called Pilot to Pilot, and this has become one of the bigger aviation podcasts for aspiring pilots, which is like really who has taken to my book, 3 Feet to the Left. And I still get emails. I was on that show last July, and I'll still get emails from people who are like, or Instagram messages or something. They're like, I just heard your show, sounds great, just ordered your book. And so to me, those are like the biggest benefits, like the reach, the network effect of both growing your own network and expanding into other people's networks. But then also, I just want to touch quickly on what I see as some format benefits, because the first podcast that I did, the Pilot to Pilot, is just audio. And so you talk about, Eileen, about being nervous potentially. I had notes all over the place on my desk.
Did you really?
Yeah, totally. So I'd listened to a couple of this guy's shows, and I kind of knew what he was going to ask. And so then I tried to think, okay, well, what are the points that I'm going to make? How do I tell a story to tell that point? And so there were a handful of questions that I wasn't prepared for, but the most of them I already knew, like, oh, I wanted to say this. And I had like a big, these are my 3 points that I want to make sure people walk away with. So that was really nice. Then I go on Andy's show and he wants to do Zoom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be on video, so I can't really have that. But I sort of did, because I put up in the corner next to where my computer was, I had like a little notepad that stood up, and I had my 3 points or so that I wanted on there to make sure that I covered. So it'd be easy to glance to and not really have people realize that you were kind of cheating a little bit, or not so much cheating, but, looking somewhere else. So anyways.
And that's after how many guest appearances?
Those are the only 2 that I've done. I really want to do a lot more.
But that's what I want. That's after 2. the things that you learned. And what Elaine said, which I want everybody to see, is it is such an amazing way to hone your message, to really figure out what the things you're talking about, if they hit or they don't, because you get to practice it in a very intimate environment. And also, I can tell you that I don't keep a whole lot of notes on it, but I pay attention to the nuances when I'm being interviewed. And when you say something that makes the guest go, or they make a certain kind of noise, or you touched on something when you do that. So you might have not really been sure about it, and you write it or you think about it, you're like, nobody's going to, but when they go, wait a second, come back to that. And then now when multiple people do that, you know that if 3 or 4 podcast guest hosts are like into it, you know that's something that can go big time down the road in terms of content. So I'm doing the same thing with homeschooling right now. As we're doing homeschool podcasts, I can see something that I think is good, and then I listen and there's no response. And I go, oh crap. It's kind of like a comedian playing a really small club. Like that joke didn't work, right? Now, when you say something 3 or 4 times and they respond to it each and every time, like we're raising great adults, not great test takers, that gets a noise from the host almost every single time I say it. So I go, that's where we're going. It allows you to test your experience. And then the other great thing about it is, usually, unless it's Andy who throws you on live, usually it's not live. And if you really screw up, they'll edit it out. I've never had to have that happen. Well, one time maybe. But it allows you to do it. And they go, well, if you screw up, don't worry, we'll cut it out. It's the greatest training ground, I think, in this day and age to get your message out. So that's great, Corey. Who else? I want to bring experiences on what people have gotten out of it or they've learned from it.
Vince, can I share?
Sure. Ben.
Yeah, I've been on a couple of podcasts, and they have a bigger audience. So like you said, more people have reached out to me when I'm on other people's podcasts because they have bigger audiences. And a lot of times I just give them my email address, as a gift, and they call me and I would set up a half hour to talk about real estate, because I really want to be known as a real estate expert. Mm-hmm. But I really don't have anything to sell, though. I don't have no course. I just want to be known as like rental property expert. So that's what I am excited about this show, on how to reach out more, because it does take work too to kind of like reach out to everybody and get on. But I've actually had a lot more success of people reaching out to me when I'm on other people's podcasts than my own podcast.
It's really interesting how that works. It is, and I found that absolutely true too. And I've recorded some lessons that are coming out. One just came out about a half an hour ago. We got 2 coming out next week. And what I want you to understand, and I don't think we could say this enough because it really takes some time. You think about when you're listening to a podcast. I don't know. Somebody tell me their favorite podcast host. Somebody throw one out there.
Vincent Puglisi.
Oh, somebody besides me.
I love Michael Port's. Do you listen to that one?
Yeah. So right there, you've become a fan of Michael Port. You start listening to it. You start trusting it. You start going into it. Guess what happens when you tune in and you're going for a walk on a Thursday morning and he goes, I want to introduce my special guest today, Elaine, right? And then you get on the show. What you've done is you've put yourself on the same level playing field and even somewhat higher than they are to all their listeners. Because now Michael Port trusts you and he's excited to have you on there. When a listener hears their favorite host playing somebody up, you have now elevated your own platform immediately by doing that. But if it's your own podcast, Ben, right? It's like there could be 4 people listening. We don't know. I listen, but when you hear it from somebody you respect and admire on the outside, and you're a part of, you have now been put into their tribe. That's why it's so valuable. So people are like, oh, how do you know this person? We had an interview. We didn't know each other that well, but they really did a great job in the interview, and now it made me look a lot better. Don't undervalue that part. That's excellent, Ben. Who else? Andy, what about you?
About me?
Yeah. I know you've done a bunch.
I don't know anything about podcasting.
Nothing.
Sorry, multitasking, cooking. Let me see if I can get on video. Oh, no. There I am. Yeah, I agree with everything said. I've done, I was thinking about it. I've done, I don't know, well over 200 interviews for my podcast where I'm interviewing other people. And I've never been like intentionally going out and trying to get interviews in other podcasts. But I made a list the other day, and I've done about 40 of those just from people reaching out and being like, hey, can I interview you or whatever. And yeah, it opens you up to other audiences. You build that trust, right? They're elevating you. Building, like Corey said, just getting to build the relationships with the other podcast hosts is so valuable. I mean, Corey and I have become good friends because he reached out and I had him on the show. So I'm planning on doing a lot more when I publish my book this fall, and I can't wait to learn from you and everybody else here how to make this happen.
I love it. Love it. All right.
I
So
guess the question though that I would have, like, for Andy and for you and anybody else is like, so you guys have shows, so you meet people and get on podcasts, I presume largely because of the fact that you have shows, but how would you leverage that the guest appearance? Like, how do you get more guest appearances? Someone in the chat, I think, said about without being just the cold calls, or how many times do you need to follow up with those emails where you don't hear anything, or those kind of questions?
Yeah. Literally the episode I should have done it early, just before this call, earlier than half an hour before, because we go into like building your influence in the industry, and it comes back to like what you're doing right now. There's so much of this intertwines. Like, what kind of shows? It really comes up. What kind of shows would you want to be on? Because when you mentioned the aviation one, very specific niche, you'll be a rock star in that world. But if you go maybe just general podcast, it's kind of like TV, right? You could be interviewed on the Today Show, but a portion of those people are going to have any interest in your cookbook, right? Maybe most people, and it goes past. But when you talk to an aviation podcast, everybody is tuning in, listening intently with their earbuds in, not being distracted. It's such a valuable time to get their attention. What are the ones that you would listen to that you'd want to be a part of? That's what I'd ask you first.
Well, and I've made a list of about 30 to 40 podcasts that I've seen on, from searching iTunes or otherwise, and you reach out to them. But if you don't have that connection, like most of the emails that I've sent don't get returned. And I'm like, all right, well,
are they emails asking to be on their show?
They are.
That's I wouldn't recommend that, because they don't know you. I know so many podcasts, and it's good to be on the inside sometimes. I know so many podcast hosts, and they are exhausted by the amount of people that reach out to them. Can I be on your show? I reached out to Joe Salche, who does Stacking Benjamins, and there's a couple of people I wanted to introduce him to for his podcast. And so I said, hey, can I make, and the first thing he said is, I can't remember what the word was, but we joked about it on a live we did on Friday. He goes, I don't want any experts. And he went down all the things he doesn't want. He's been pitched so hard, so often, that it really just comes from relationships that are built, that he trusts, and specific towards what they're talking about. So Greg's always looking for guests. So in your world, here's my question. Have you connected with them in a way where you didn't ask for anything?
I mean, probably not. I don't know who these people are. I mean, I've thought about, you guys go to that podcast summit or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and I've thought about maybe I need to go to one of those types of conferences.
If you want this, absolutely. I mean, Andy, Elaine, what is, hopefully this opens up soon. Hopefully podcast movement happens soon enough. But do you see, like, that's another.
It's huge. It's huge. Yeah, right? Just go there and network, and you meet. I mean, I know of so many podcasters because I've been going to those conferences the last 3 years and meeting everybody. And there's lots of people I can call. A lot of people I've met, and we've done, exchanges where it's like, oh, you have a show. Let's just have each other on each other's shows. That's a big reason why I've done, 40 shows or whatever that I've been on, because just make friends with people, and they're like, oh, let's have each other on. So that's a great way to do it. And Corey, I was going to ask you, are you getting really personal with the outreach? Because the reason, I think it's good for everybody to hear this, the reason that I said yes and had you on my show is because you reached out and were like very personal. It was clear you had listened to it, and you left me a review. And I've probably had, 500 people reach out to me in the last 3 years to ask to come on my podcast. You're one of like 2 that have actually done that. And so I've said yes to hardly anybody.
He's one of 2 that have done what? Left a review?
Like sending me an email and said, I really like your podcast. Like said something that proved that you had actually listened to it, I think. And and left a 5-star review. And I can't remember if you sent me a screenshot of that or not, but that nobody else does that. And it makes a huge difference.
That's exactly, if you listen to today's episode, this is exactly what we talk about. How many reviews, just think about it. Think like a podcaster. Think like a podcaster. And what would you, if you publish a podcaster, Raymond, you have a podcast, what do you want? You want more reviews. You want more shares. You want the word being spread. You don't want to be pitched over and over again, right? Once you get established.
Absolutely.
Right? But if, say, I'm going to give an example because I kind of know this world. Raymond, I listen to Raymond's podcast, the beginner photography podcast. I am a photographer. I know I've got something I can add. I've listened to these different things. I really think my topic would be good. You know, maybe I'm writing a book. If I go to Raymond, he might, and he just out of the blue, hey, can I be on your show? He might be like, and he might have you on. But that's so bottom of the rung in doing it because Raymond's not even going to know who you are. So the interview is going to be a lot less in depth than if he does. But if you reach out to Raymond and you, for instance, leave the review, send a screenshot of the review, and the review is literally like on episode 172, that one guest that he had, they talked about this, and I got this takeaway. You do that in the reviews, it stands out. Trust me, podcasters read their reviews. And when you send it to them without any expectations, there's almost like I want to help this person out. It's just human nature that they want to. And then they're like, what can I can't tell you how many times just by doing that, somebody goes, I need to have you on the show. I just need to have you. I didn't even ask because I don't like to ask. So you do all the other things, build it up. Corey, everybody, if you like somebody's podcast, share it. Share it with why you like it. It's so counter. I don't know why it's so difficult to do. But it's like we should be sharing each other's stuff of the people that we trust. So that's the first way to start right there. Apino had a question about networking because Andy, you just kind of glossed over, go to a conference and network. And he's like, what did he say? That's too, what did he say? It's not easy for everyone. It should be described. How do you describe it to somebody that's not a natural extrovert?
Is the question back to me?
Yes.
It's building relationships with people, getting to know people, having conversations. You know, it builds over time. So like I think about this last time going to PodFest in Orlando, which was like the last conference that happened before all this went crazy, was the beginning of March or mid-March. And Jody was there. I'll see her on today. But like I spent 3 days of people just coming up to me going, oh my God, I know who you are. We've connected on Facebook, blah, blah, whatever. Or like, I know you through Vincent or somebody else. It was amazing. But going back to the beginning, when that's not happening, I mean, I'll just walk up to people and say like, hey, who are you? What do you do? What's your podcast about? And you just start a conversation. You've got something in common. You've got a podcast, or you're interested in podcasts, or you've got a book or something. And just, I lead with curiosity, just always being really interested in people and what they're interested in, and build a lot of relationships that way.
The other, I love the other benefit, and I don't want to go too deep into it because not everybody's gonna be able to go to a in-person podcast conference, but I think you can. There's a lot, once this opens up, there's a lot of locals. Like Emily, like in Philly, I know the local Philly podcast group that they get together. What I learned, the first podcast movement, I didn't know it. Jamie Slingerland, who's a friend of mine, he is a social butterfly. And it's like Andy. And when you get around certain people that bring other people together, when you get into their group, so Jamie like pulled me in. He's like, hey, meet this person, meet that person. All of a sudden I'm hanging out with 6 or 7 people that are having podcasts, that are doing all this stuff. Now all their friends become your friends. And I can't tell you how many asks I got for podcasts just from being in a circle of people. So run with a group of people. Elaine, you see that, right? There's strategies.
Totally. Yeah, I totally see it. And you do that. I mean, I think we all had dinner, right? At Podcast Movement.
Place.
Yeah, which was great fun. I think, you know, I'm like one of those people I saw the word ambivert, so both extroverted and introverted. I'm like smack in the middle. And so I sort of swing, depends on my mood. And so I get it, you know, that networking sometimes is really easy and sometimes it's really hard. And there's a lot of great education at these conferences. And so one thing to do is just, so how did you like that session? Mm-hmm. And that always, you know, I learned this, or I didn't like it, or I got this highlight. How do you, you know, you build on the shared content. And that immediately goes to, so what's your podcast? You know, if you're going to a podcast movement or a podfest or whatever. I like the local thing. You know, the best example of this is you, Vincent, because I met you like 3-4 years ago at a podcast movement.
Mhm.
And then you followed up and actually did pitch to be on my podcast, which was very new at the time. And so I didn't have much of an audience, but it was a cool topic. And you were really personal about it in the email, you know, really enjoyed meeting you, blah, blah, blah. And it took a while because I was busy. And, you know, I mean, this is going to take a while. It's not like you're going to send an email out and the next day somebody's going to get back to you and set up an interview. You just have to be patient. Maybe you have to follow up. I think you followed up once or twice. And then we did the interview. And I was like, people don't follow up from conferences nearly enough.
Totally.
And you must have been really organized about
Fortune's
it.
in the follow-up.
Well, I was also going through, you know, the book was coming out. I was in a different, you know, like, okay, I want to get on a lot. I had a goal, right? So I was probably way more aggressive then than I am now. Now it's very organic. It's basically people just asking, you know, just from connection. But I know a lot of people are in that grinded out startup stage in terms of this. And the more you get on, the better. And who was it that said, Corey, was it the long tail of it? I still get email signups from podcasts I did 2 years ago, which is amazing. Certain clients at times, just people. And the other thing is, the more people hear you, I know here's a hurdle to it. And I went through it and I've kind of gotten over it. You kind of get tired of telling your story, right? You kind of get tired of telling the same story. But I was taught this when I was in the newspaper world. Like, if you go out and you half-ass it because you're kind of like, oh, kind of told that story again, every person picking up that newspaper the next day, they might not have seen it ever before. And you might give them a really bad impression if you half-ass it. So you've got to go and find different nuances to the story. It allows you to refine it better and you find out more about yourself. Andy Andrews said he learned more about his book, The Traveler's Gift, after he wrote it than when he wrote it, because he learned so much by talking about it. So you get to dive into deeper issues by doing this. So I just think the volume needs to be turned up a lot more. Who is on the fence? Like, I want to hear some questions about where you guys are at with this.
Can I throw another little idea in there? So Kent wrote on the chat, when pitching a podcast, it's also important to list out 3 to 4 potential specific topics you could talk about on their show. Easier you can make it on the podcast host, they're more likely to say yes. I totally agree with that. And the thing is, if you have certain topics and you're in a niche industry, say the aviation industry, and you just keep a running, like, get really organized, have that list of podcasts that you could be on where what you have to say is pertinent, and then you watch the news, right? And so when a news event happens, you're ready to get in touch with that host and say, I can address this thing that happened yesterday. And that can be really useful depending on the kind of podcast it is. Like if it's a lifestyle podcast where it's evergreen content, it might not matter. But if it's stuff where they're keeping track of the news in that industry or, you know, that niche, that's the advice that we give to our like big clients. Is just be ready, you know, just like any communications manager would with pitching newspapers or magazines or whatever, be ready.
Totally. Who's speaking up? Somebody was saying something.
That was me. Because when I reach out, like even this most recent round, I was kind of playing with those aviation podcasts. I was reaching out to say, look, a lot of my book is about the career journeys that a lot of people had. And now we have this coronavirus that is like destroying our business, at least in the near run. And like to say, you've got a lot of aspiring pilots. I'd love to come on and share my perspective that I gained that I think would be really valuable to your listeners about this. But maybe it's just I haven't followed up. And again, I see the idea of like, if you're just pitching like to be on, then it's just one more ask for someone they don't know.
Totally.
You gotta follow up and find a way to stand out, because I get tons and tons of emails from people, mostly from, you know, podcast bookers, whatever, they're trying to book people on my podcast, and I ignore most of them. I don't even respond. I don't have time for that stuff. But sometimes if somebody follows up a few times and it's personal, then I'll notice it and I might respond.
that we didn't even touch on that, like how many different agencies, and I'm the same way. I get pitched for people for guests for my podcast, and I go, I've done 287 episodes and I don't have any guests. Did you not know that? And then they go, oh, well, because they're just mass bugging everybody. So we have somebody who's saying something. No?
Just affirming you.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. So so in this world, like Elaine, what you're talking about is really vital, especially right now. If you can learn how to make it topical as well, you can get on quicker. Because if it, like Raymond in the photography world, how many people are getting crushed? If there's a solution that somebody has, maybe they're going to bump up and you're going to be like, we got to run this sooner. Choose FI reached me about homeschooling, just jumped right up. And they're months in advance for interviews, just jump right in the line because of the topical part of it. So how many people are in an industry right now that can talk topically? Because think about even the news world. Everybody's like, oh, get on. How hard is it to get in there? Every day, television stations and newspapers are looking for content for their paper, as are podcasters. They don't have it all set. They're looking to fill those holes. So if you can bring something to them of value in short time, then you got to have all your other stuff in order.
I can say from experience, just yesterday, I got an email from somebody pitching somebody else to be on the podcast. And it literally just says, hi, my name is Ariana. I'm an admin assistant for this photographer. I'm reaching out because I would love to connect you with the photographer. What are your requirements and what is the application process? And that's it. Whereas 2 days ago, I got another email from somebody saying, hey, I used to be a model, now I'm a photographer. Here's a list of topics that might be relevant to new photographers when they're working with new models. Would you be interested in chatting? And that second person who reached out 2 days ago, right away, I said, yeah, this is a great topic. I'd love to have you on the show. Whereas this person who emailed me yesterday saying, hi, what is the application process? I'm never going to respond.
Never going to respond.
I have no idea who this person is. There's no, and then at the bottom of the email, it lists like phone number and office hours. And for office hours, it just says office hours are depending on wedding and other scheduled events. Like, what kind of information is that? It's just like a terrible, it's just like, you really need to be putting out like a great first impression when you're reaching out to somebody, because oftentimes, as a podcast host, you do get pitched for a lot of things. And even in that email, you can still leave a good first impression.
That's a huge part of it. Huge part of it. John, what about you? What's your podcast experience?
I haven't done a ton of interviews. I think I've done 5. The podcasts that I host are, just me talking. They're not interview based. But one of the things that I know that I need to be doing is more interviews. I appreciate Kent had me on the other day, and so I appreciate his invitation there, and I had the chance to talk. But I know, next year I have a book coming out, and one of the things they want me to do is connect more and more with this. And even I think you might have said this on something. The connection, the fact that I'm even part of this group came from a podcast interview, Vincent, that you did on the How to Money podcast. Yeah. That's where I first heard your story, and then I bought your book and, all that. So I see the value to it. The thing that I've been wrestling with the past few days as I've been listening through the audio lessons that you've been releasing is, just this idea of pitching myself as a podcast guest. So I've been listening for kind of tips and tricks and things like that you've been suggesting there, trying to begin putting together a list of shows that I could potentially introduce myself to and things like that. The thing I'm wondering is, so obviously I could leave a review for a show. I'm wondering what else I would have to give, because the shows that I host aren't interview based. So it's not like I have the opportunity to be interviewed in return and kind of swap interviews. So I'm just wondering, maybe in a spot like I'm in, what would be the best way that I could do a favor for them, or, offer something valuable for them that would be just a reciprocal kindness.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, right? Solo episode, solo show. I don't have guests on. I can't do the swap like Rachel and Andy can do, which is a very big benefit if you can do that, if you want the right people on there. So what are the things you can do otherwise besides that? First things first, it's like, First of all, it's chicken or the egg, right? How to Money reached out to me. I didn't think it was anything. The way they reached out at first, I was kind of like, they were like, can you send us copies of your book? And I'm laughing about it. Not like, it really didn't seem real the way they reached out to me. And we were in the middle of traveling home, and I was like, we're traveling out of the way, and I was like, yeah, let's schedule it for January, right? And this is my fault. It's a really good story. It's really my fault. And I was kind of like, we'll get to it. And we scheduled the date, and I didn't put it in my calendar. And because they were kind of like bugging me to just send them some books. And I was like, I'd never had anybody ask me, just send us some books, right? So I'm like, okay, usually people are like, I'll buy the book, or I've read it already. And then, so it seemed a little bit odd to me. So we scheduled, then all of a sudden I realized, oh crap, I bought tickets to a football game with my son, beginning of January. Last minute, I was like, would you mind if we reschedule this? No problem. Do it the next week. Turns out to be this great interview. They have an enormous following. I had no idea. Like, I should have done the research. We got more email signups from that podcast than probably anything but Choose FI. It was just, the lesson I learned was not downplay anything. And I kind of did. I was kind of like, it seemed a little bit odd to me, and it turned out to be amazing. And then look, you're here because of that. But they found it because they heard about my book being talked about other places. That's why they asked. So the compound effect over time. But for now, I'm trying to think what would be the best way to, first things first, is share their episodes, or just reach out personally and connect with them about what they're working on. If somebody messaged me and they said, this episode the other day was great, that guest or whatever, see if you can develop a conversation and a friendship with them. That's the first part of it, without any asking or expectation. They're so ready for the pitch. And when you don't give it to them, they're often taken off guard, and then they actually want to ask you. So it's just like Andy and Raymond said, it's the way that you reach out, and it's the personal connection that goes within it.
Makes sense.
Elaine.
Well, obviously, in addition to sharing, let's say John is on somebody's podcast,
yep.
Or you, Vincent, and you can't interview, you can at least, you can write great social media, you can share with all of your followers the episode, the podcast in general, but you can also put links to their podcast in anything that you send out. So if you have an email newsletter,
yep.
Your own show notes, if you have show notes. I don't think you have show notes, Vincent, do you?
No, no.
But if you have show notes for your show, you can link to their show and talk about it, and use the rest of your media to give them exposure.
Can you talk about them on your podcast? That's what I talk about. One of the lessons. It's like, I'm trying to think, who was I talked to? And he was like, I don't feel right like talking about your stuff because I feel like I'm stealing it. And I'm like, no, that's not the way it works. If you plagiarize it, that's a bad thing to do to anybody. Take it word for word, put it in as your own. That's people that create content love to be recognized. So if you listen to one of these podcasts, and this is the way it should work naturally, what a great lesson that they had. Do an episode about it, and then talk about what you learned from it. On the other end is your own content, but with them baked into it with their own information. And then in the show notes or your own social media, you get to put it out there. And then all of a sudden they're sitting there playing with their kids, and they get a notification that John talked about their podcast on their podcast and gave all this credit. Your status with them just goes up. And then their friends possibly can see it as well. Gustavo.
I just want to back up a little bit. I don't think we've covered this yet. It's like, what's your goal? What's the goal of you getting on that podcast? Like, where are you going to lead these people? If these people are interested in you, or, having something prepared before you even start this whole process, right?
Yep.
Do you have a landing page that you're going to start gathering? Is it for email gathering? Is it for, what is it for? So having an action plan other than just like, oh, cool, I'm going to be on a podcast and it's going to be fun and I can talk to people about it. But what's your end goal at the end of the day, I think is something key to talk about.
That's a good point. And I think Vincent and I both made plenty of mistakes around that. I know a while ago, like a couple of years ago, I wanted to get on podcasts, and it was really just because of ego. Now I've got much more of a purpose and a lot more to share, and actually setting up a system to take advantage of it.
Totally. Kent, I want to get back to Gustavo. Kent, go ahead.
This is a situation where having your own show.
You're low, Kent. Your audio's low.
Oh, is it? Can you hear me?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Oh, hang on.
Oh, we were going to ask you to scream.
How about now?
Much better.
Okay, sorry, I was on the wrong microphone. So this is a situation where having your own show or your own content can be really helpful. So I've got an episode of my show coming out in a couple of weeks called, I think I'm titling it the Top 20 Podcast for Business Writers. So like Vincent, your show's going to be mentioned there. Andy's show's going to be mentioned there. I think I'm mentioning Jody Kringle's show and a bunch of other ones. And several of them are like really huge podcasts, but some of them are pretty small podcasts. So I'm using that as an opportunity. And it's a legit thing. I'm not just trying to like blow smoke with this episode, but it's a legit thing where I'm promoting those people's shows while at the same time developing stronger connections, also delivering content to my audience. So having your own podcast can actually be really helpful with developing those connections. And maybe I'll wind up on some of those shows. I don't know.
And we'll see. I love it. And there's also a social status that goes deeper into this. When people hear that, they go, oh, you're connected to that person. And how do you know that person? And just take this away from this. It's superficial, but it's true. People want to be around other people that are well connected. They just do. Because they're like, oh, down the road, if you know this person, Pat Flynn or blah, 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 maybe someday I'll know Pat Flynn and maybe someday I'll get on their show. So to do that in a real organic, natural way, some people are like, oh, that's name dropping. I don't think it is. I think what you're doing is you are promoting the people that have helped you. And, it's a give and take with that. Like it's adding value to your listeners. It's adding value to the person that you're promoting, and it helps you as well. I think that the whole name dropping thing, unless you do it in a really just odd way, I don't have a problem. I think it's a great thing to do.
Well, the funny thing is, it's kind of funny when we see stuff out there that there's a nice graphic to it, the audio is produced well, we see the end result and it looks like something that's really legitimate, and that's kind of important. But it's funny because I totally just made this up. I was just thinking one day, hey, how can I promote all my friends' podcasts that I really like and frame it under my own podcast topic? Well, let me just do a top 20. And I just totally made that up. So
it's a couple things on that. It's a really good idea, and I like that a lot. That's a good idea. Like for John, you were saying if you have a solo show, you can always mention other people, mention other podcasts, mention books as kind of a reward exchange. Vincent does this really well. I know you're not doing it as like a tit for tat, but like you mention people. I know you've mentioned me on your podcast probably 5 times in the last year or so, how long you've been doing it, and I always appreciate it. And when I was at Podfest, I ran into a bunch of people there, but one of them was Jody Mayberry, who was like, I know you from something, and started talking. And I was like, wait, I heard Vincent talk about you on his podcast, which you did an episode about him, and started the whole conversation. Another thing, Kent, you could do, you made me think of, is some company sent me an email and said, hang on, honey.
This is like that kid coming into the room in that viral video, right?
It's like that in my life every day. Because I'm always doing these live shows. So, I have this talent development podcast, and some company reached out with their blog and said, we just did a compilation of the top 25 podcasts in HR talent development, something like that. And your podcast is on the list. Congratulations. We'd love for you to share this out. And in my mind, being way too much into the marketing stuff and being skeptical, I was like, such a marketing ploy, right? But I don't know who I said it to. I think it was even my new assistant, Stephanie. She's like, that's awesome. You should share that out. So I'm like, okay, fine. You know what? They did the effort of doing this. I'll share it on LinkedIn. So I share it on LinkedIn. I get like 50 likes and comments. Real congratulations on making this list. And I'm like, why was I so skeptical? I should have just shared this out. They get rewarded for putting this together. I look good for being on this list of the top 20, podcasts and talent development, whatever. So Kent, you could do the same thing. John, you could do the same thing. Like lots of us could do that stuff.
I'd much rather share Kent's post where it's like, oh, what an honor, right? Than my own. I just would.
Yeah. Oh, and Corey, you have a blog and a newsletter and stuff. You could start featuring these other aviation podcasts, and like the top podcast on aviation that I listen to and feature an episode. You're going to get these people's attention. Just like you texted me the other day that you were going to feature one of my episodes in your newsletter. I was like, wow, that's awesome. I didn't know anybody even listened to that. And you could do the same thing with them.
That's a fantastic idea.
Even that was very organic. Like it just fit. I wanted to mention that episode in this thing, and I wasn't really thinking until it was mentioned earlier about doing that in my emails more often, even to be like a little segment at the bottom, what I'm listening to, or what or somewhere in the piece. It'd be easy to incorporate those types of things that people might find interesting.
So Corey, you learned that organically and it worked, and there's integrity to it. But if you can do those and you can keep those things together and do that with consistency now and a plan, then you have something going there where you're going to be known, and you're going to be known by all these people. If you do it right, you do it well. That's the key. So many people do this wrong. They do it in terms of SEO. They do it in terms because they want to get in there, as opposed to like, I truly believe in this and I want to share this out. Dan put his hand up.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I jumped on the call late, so if you've answered this, we can skip it. But I was wondering about how to ask people who have been on other podcasts for introductions, for example. So I understand the process of pitching hosts directly. I need practice at it, but I understand it. But as far as like maybe reaching out to you, Vincent, to say, hey, would you mind giving me an introduction to a person? What would you suggest as far as like how to go about doing that, or some best practices in that regard?
That's a great question. Because my intros generally come organically. They don't usually come when people ask me to introduce them to somebody else. Because here's the thing. This is the key. What's in it for everybody? This is what you have to think about. Yes, of course, introduce me to Seth Godin, right? Of course, that's good for you, right? Does it matter to Seth Godin? Does it help me? I've done that before and the person kind of took advantage of it, or they did it wrong. And then that damaged my relationship with the person that I had trust with, because I introduced them to somebody that wasn't on the up and up about it. So I am all about connecting, but I don't think it's as much about, like, give me an example, like somebody that you'd want, give me an example that somebody you'd want me or somebody else to connect you to.
Oh, that's good. I guess I don't have anything off the top of my head. Well, I guess, being in the personal finance space, I know a lot of them from FinCon and from Podcast Movement.
Yep.
But then I guess I don't really know like the Choose FI guys. That's for example. So I don't know them directly, but I know a lot of people that know them.
Of course.
And so if I were to want to be on Choose FI, certainly I would want to put together a pitch to be like, hey, I think I'd be great for this podcast, that I could send directly to them. But then maybe if I could ask you to send along that pitch, is that a good idea? Or that's where my brain goes.
No, I don't think it's a good idea. No, this is where it's hard, because the Choose FI in this world is kind of like the Pat Flynn and the Seth Godin in other worlds, right? There's where, when everybody's aiming to get there and they know that that's going to be so beneficial to them. Choose FI happened organically. It's the John Lee Dumas Be First or Be Different. It just happened to be early on. We happened to connect before they even came out with the show. So there was this natural reciprocity that went on, but it wasn't. And, so there's introductions that I'll make, but at the same time, I'm careful about it because I'm careful for them. I'm careful for them in terms of how it's going to work. What I would suggest, and it's the long-term answer, but it's what Andy brought it on before. The live events break down the barriers. Everybody's emailing, everybody's pitching. But if I can tell you, Dan, if we're sitting there at Podcast Movement and it goes off in August in Dallas and you're there and Jonathan and Brad are there, it is so easy for me to say, hey guys, meet Dan. Dan's a part of TLF, blah, blah, blah. He's doing this. It's so easy. I'm not sending a calculated email to make a pitch. I'm just saying, hey, come on over. That's happened better. So that's why we say get to these things, because your introductions will increase tremendously by doing that.
A perfect example, I'm not in the financial space, but I know that Stacking Benjamin's podcast you mentioned is pretty big, right?
Yep.
And what's the host name? I forget his name.
Nobody can say his name. Joe Salche.
Joe Salche. Yeah, Joe. I met him at Podfest because I was hanging out with Nick Pavlidis and Josh Brown, who are both in this group, and they know him, and they're like, hey, and they introduced me, and like, we're hanging out. Now he knows who I am. I'm not trying to get on that podcast, but I bet I got a way better shot than the thousands of cold emails that he gets on a weekly basis.
And now he's a columnist for USA Today. He's a money columnist for USA Today, right? So the other thing is, it's easier, Dan, for me then, when I know Andy's met Joe. I know they've connected. I know he knows Nick and Josh and everybody else. It's easy for me just out of the blue, when it's not needed, say, Andy, Joe, I'm not sure if you guys know each other. I think you guys met. It's such an easier reconnection than an out of the blue email where it's obviously more helpful to the person wanting to get on the show.
I'll get off this in like 5 minutes. Right now.
And you know,
what's that, Andy?
I was gonna say, you know, it's funny too. At Choose FI, also another one I'm not gonna necessarily try to get on because they're huge, huge, huge. But I've had Brad on my show. He knows who I am. He actually reached out to me and just asked me if he could come on. Funny enough, and I'm like, yeah, of course you can come on my podcast. But now I've got that. Like, if I want to leverage something to try to build a relationship more and potentially go try to get on that show.
Without
Okay, cool.
Elaine.
That helps out a lot. Thanks, guys.
Good. You got it. Elaine, go ahead. You're muted. Oh. All right, there we go.
Okay,
now you're good.
How quickly, you know, part of my nervousness is that we've been collecting emails kind of a little bit, but we haven't got an email newsletter going. There's a lot of stuff that we still have to do for our business, and Lindsay's been sick for a few weeks, so I'm, you know, juggling stuff by myself. She does not have the virus.
Good.
But how, like, do you have a newsletter ready to go? Once you collect those emails, what's the process?
You mean our process?
Yeah, in other words, if you've been on a show and you're saying, you know, here's a link for a download for your lead gen so that you can get those emails. How quickly after that show do you send out a new email newsletter, especially for me, because I don't have a newsletter yet. I have to get one going.
You know me, I've been terrible at this in the past. I think, you know, like we've collected emails and we did nothing with them. We finally made the commitment. Thanks, Trisha, you know, in the mastermind, she held me to it. And so we've been doing it, 12 weeks now? And now we're doing the homeschool one as well and just consistent every Thursday. Our setup, we've set up a little bit of an automation, and we are not the ones to really teach on automation, but we actually did something, which is really impressive for us. Where we set up, Elizabeth did all this. And so basically when they sign up for the newsletter, so say right now you go to Choose FI homeschool, not the homeschool one, that automation isn't set up yet, but for the regular one, when you log in and you sign in, the next day they get an automated email saying, you know, because they get to download the book, right? They get the audio book. Thanks so much. You might also like, you know, Vincent has a podcast, a daily podcast. Here's the link. Here's 3 episodes that we think could be good ones to start with. And thanks so much. So immediately they get introduced to the podcast and then they get on the weekly email list. We don't have a 7-step, like I personally don't like them. When I sign up for something and then I have 7 emails in 7 days, I'm already gone. That's just me personally. To me, it's too much, but it's not, but it works. People do it. For me, it's like introduction email. And then what I try to do, what we've been trying to do lately is if they've went out of their way, you got to think of it this way. If they've went out of their way and they've signed up for what you did and they listened to an hour-long interview and they stayed on the list, they are a lot more interested in what you do than most other people, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're going to start working in now is just even personal videos to the people that are on the list. Pat Flynn does this very well. Just, hey, and because now we have a starter package to TLF, being that there's really not much available in everything in the community or the mastermind. There's a starter package at a lower price. So financially for us, that could be thousands of people. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect us at all. So it's very easy. Hey, if you're interested, we have this. Here's a trial for this. So it's a very soft approach, very soft sell, but it can just grow exponentially.
Cool.
Does that help?
Yes, that helps a lot.
That's just our approach. I don't know if it's the best, but we just keep learning trial and error.
Yeah, I think Amy Porterfield calls it a nurture sequence. Like as soon as someone signs up for a list, you kind of have some automated emails that go out. I know Pat Flynn talks about it in his new course, Email Marketing Magic. And so information's out there. I know it as a nurture sequence, but some people just call it a sales sequence.
And everybody's show of hands, whatever. I know Amy, I had to unsubscribe from Amy's. It was too, like, I was getting more emails from her than anybody that I knew. I'm like, I don't know you. I don't need an email from you every day. Does anybody else? Like, am I alone in that? Jeremy says yes. Aaron, Dan. Does anybody?
No, I don't want emails every day.
Anybody not bothered? This is just a test for everybody. Is anybody not bothered by it?
I'm not bothered because I don't read any of the newsletters that I'm subscribed to.
Yeah, you don't mind. Okay.
I don't read yours either. I'm sorry.
No, I'm not offended. It's a good one today, though.
I think a lot of the times, if it's too many, I just go and unsubscribe. If I haven't opened it in a week, I unsubscribe. Like, it's got to be something that's catching me constantly.
And that's fine. And you want, and just when you have the list, you want the people that don't want it to unsubscribe. That's not a problem. Everybody worries about the unsubscribes. It's not a problem. It's just they're not your right. Build it towards your right audience. So that's the whole thing. And we talk about your opt-in, which we haven't talked about today. The juicier you can make your opt-in, the better of a conversion you're going to have over. And I think we under design that as well. Who right now, if you got on a podcast, would not even have an opt-in for something to sign into? Andy, you wouldn't? You don't have one. Dan, Andy, you don't have an opt-in?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. On the talent development side, I do, yeah. But I'm thinking more about my book and where I'm going with that. I'm starting fresh.
Okay.
New email list. I haven't created that yet.
Okay. Pino, you don't? He said, we suck at this shit. Well, I'm surprised. I would thought you would. Okay. Any questions about that?
Questions about using an opt-in for an email list?
Like, or if we want to go back to even getting on the show, I'm open for anything. But is there where in the process are you looking to get better at? Like, some people are just trying to figure out if they even should get on shows, but some people know they have a message, they can get on shows, but they don't really have a way for people to stay in touch with them afterwards.
You know, I have a question kind of about, obviously for me, I host a podcast called the Beginner Photography Podcast. My expertise is kind of in the realm of photography, but I think of other podcasts that I could be on, and the other photography podcasts that are out there are geared more towards professionals. And I don't know, I guess, where the audience of not professionals who are looking to become interested in the Beginner Photography Podcast are. And the only thing that I've thought of is potentially parents who want to take better photos of their kids. And that's that. And then at that point, what do I do with that?
Okay. Maybe I didn't quite get your question.
I guess I'm thinking about what other podcasts to be on that would fit, that would have an audience that would be interested in becoming listeners of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Where do you want to bring them to? Do you want to bring them to your Facebook page? Like, where do you want them to ultimately wind up that you can keep in touch with them? After an interview?
What's the end goal, I guess? What's the end goal?
What's
Buy
the
a
end goal?
product to what are you bringing these people in for? Versus if a professional listens to your podcast, what is that? You're saying a professional is not your target audience, right? Because a professional is going to listen to your podcast and not learn much from it per se. So sounds like you want a beginner person that's like, oh, I can get the Lightroom presets, I can get the how to use my camera manual thing. So you're looking for a wider audience, basically. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah, I suppose so. So that kind of leaves out other photography podcasts, which is my thinking. Am I wrong in that?
No, I don't think. You're looking for, but I want to know where you want them to go. Do you want to build the Facebook? I mean, if you know this, it gets very clear. You've got a vibrant Facebook group. Do you want them right into the Facebook group first? Because if you there's 7 different things they're confused, they do none of them. Do you want to sign up?
Facebook group would be a great place to have them go.
Well, there you go. Okay, so now you get to craft it. We've got this amazing group. This is where I spend my time. I help these people do this, right? Once you know that, like who said something about parents? Somebody said something about Emily, Raymond, can you be a guest on parenting podcasts? You want to talk right now? Raymond, talk about missed opportunities, but new opportunities. Parents are home with their kids, bored out of their mind right now, don't know what to do. Don't know. How cool would it be if you could teach them how to take better? We're going to have the greatest freaking photo album of 2020 ever, because it's going to be me, you, and them. We're all taking better pictures of each other. You go down that road, you can go in any space and talk about, not any space, but there's a lot of things that you open up, like the parenting, different things going on, lifestyle type of stuff. How to just see what people are struggling with. Like people are doing those chalk art things, right? Which is cool, but now everybody's copying the same chalk art. Like, I don't know, like, come on, do something original, do something different. But they're doing that because they're following other people who are guiding them on how to keep yourself busy during this crazy time, right? There's people, I can be on a podcast about how to build a business in this downtime or how to homeschool. You could be on the same thing about how to learn photography to keep yourself active. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, so as an idea is to think about your audience and what problem they have, and then what other shows they might listen to. For example, I help couples get on the same page with money, personal finance. And so I've been on a bunch of wedding planning podcasts because here you have couples dealing with a big money thing. Am I a wedding planner? No, not even close. But the advice I have benefits the audience of those podcasts. So, you're talking about beginning photography. Personally, I'm looking to grow my Instagram following, and I'm going to need to learn some photography basics just to make good pictures so I can post online. So I'm not buying, constant stock photos. So for me, beginning photography isn't about getting a nice camera. It's just like, how can I post better pictures on Instagram? And so when you think about me and the podcasts that I might listen to, that's the podcast you want to be guests on. So just because you're talking about photography doesn't mean you have to go on photography podcasts.
No. And you're absolutely right, Dan. And it's actually the opposite. If you could bring a more diverse crowd in that would never have thought about this, the quality is going to be different. You're going to be, but there's so many different things. How many different people are struggling with getting a picture done now, right? Maybe your family can help you get a better headshot for yourself that you need in good light to put on LinkedIn because you lost your job. There's so many different ways that you can go to bring people. That's the point, is to bring people into this group and to learn. But you got to know what it is. We're just throwing out ideas. But
yeah. No, I love these ideas. So then my next question is, what happens after that? If I create, a topic of, how to take photos for Instagram so that you don't have to buy stock photos, do I create a downloadable, cheat sheet list or whatever to have them come sign up for every topic? There's that. And
Absolutely.
Then there's a headshot thing. Then there's better photos of your kids.
What you could do is
make something different for all of them.
Depends on how you want to set it up. I talked about it in an episode coming up. If you want to create a resource page, go to, RaymondHatfield.com/resources. Here's the link to join our community. Here's the link for the PDF on how to take a better headshot of your spouse. Here's the link of this, right? You might, if you want them to go to one spot, that could be dangerous because you might lose it. Dan, I'm going to mute you. We got background. But so if you want to go to one spot, make that the download. Make it go there. Mm-hmm. But if you're like, anywhere that they go here, I'm happy with. I'm happy if they go in the group. I'm happy if they get on the email list for this. I'm happy with this. Make a resource page. And then they go to that page. And if they sign up for one, because we're going to do that down the road, we'll have different opt-ins. Either one they choose is going to the list. They don't have to choose them all. Gustavo. With Dan, Gustavo, then Dan.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the avatar, right? Like, who is that one person? And I think you're bouncing around a little bit, like Dan was saying, right? Like, and what I'm getting sort of the visual for me is like, they're ending up in the group, like Vincent says, but then what is that goal? Where do you want it? What journey do you want them to go through? Like, do you want to have the mom's, weekend class for beginner photography? Like, what is that big package, I guess, that you want to sell? Like, what is that 1,000 true fans going to buy?
Yep.
So that I get that. That's sort of what's in my head right now, picturing.
Yeah, where's it going to pay off in the end? Like, you do all this, but where in the end will it pay off for you and your business and your family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through educational courses, and then ultimately a premium membership where they just get extended podcast interviews specifically on the business side of photography.
So you build that out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody.
You got it.
I mean, I don't think you're doing anything different than like what Andrew from PhotoBiz is doing, right? You're hooking everybody with great interviews and you're bringing them into your community. There's probably 99% of photographers have no idea who Andrew is,
Yep.
Right.
So it's not like you have to do anything too different also. So think about it that way.
Except don't overthink, Raymond. That's it.
That's not an option. Always overthink.
Always overthink. The always overthinker. Dan Spiker.
Okay, I think just with that as well. I mean, so in Pittsburgh, I have buddies who have the only private state store in the state, private liquor store, and they're scrambling to get product online. So they're like, hey, how do we shoot stuff to put it online quickly? And they're like, well, we need a photo box. I'm like, no, you just need a window with a white background. And so just walking people through even that kind of stuff, especially for this time of year, or the small business owner, the mom who's a crafter. There's a lot of directions that can go. That's, again, it's all feeding into that single email list. But you're creating all these different resources. So you get somebody with their family photos, but mom sees that mom's a crafter and she's doing something on Etsy and she needs better photos. That's what sells their work. So you can walk them through a whole list of things along the way. That could even include a longer paid video tutorial within that as well.
I wouldn't have even thought about crafty moms. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Excellent. The only thing I caution about you, but it might not matter, is if you have so much diversity within your beginner photography group that it's obscure. But I don't think that's going to be the case if everybody's just beginning to learn. You could then build out sub niches from within that. Like Dan said, the business thing is great. People might get in that realm and know nothing against the photographers, but they might get good enough to just shoot their own stuff, and you could teach them that side of it. And you could just teach them how to be better, just enough so they can be dangerous, so they can get their product stuff out and not have awful light and bad composition.
Yeah, I think a lot of them have the idea of, we want to hire a photographer, but they're just getting started, and they need to get enough business early on to be able to take it to that next level. What we can do in photography, with lighting and Photoshop, particularly in product photography. If you look at high-end product photography, food photography, I mean, a mom with a camera and a variable 5.6 lens isn't going to do a whole lot. But it might be enough to get them going. So, and then you're now the expert. And if it's something that can be shipped to you, you can grow your photography business that way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yeah, absolutely.
You guys should talk. All right. What other questions we got? This is good.
I mean, one more thing for Raymond is like Creative Mornings, that's a community, right? There's a ton of creatives and there's so many people there. Some know how to take photos, but some don't. So it's like finding these communities of people that are coming together that, what type of person might you have there? Maybe a person that does calligraphy or whatever, paper products, and needs to be able to take better photos of their stuff. So finding those creative communities out there that, again, I'm just trying to figure out the avatar, right? Like, who is that person?
You're right, because think about it this way. You find those communities and you get involved in them, just like you guys do here. You earn trust. I can tell you by being active in different communities, I've gotten interviews from shows and work because you're involved and people there know you and they go, oh, you should talk to Raymond about that. If you go into a different type of community that's not photography related, but you help in this way, you'll be known as the photographer. But if you're the photographer in a community of 8,000 photographers, you're just like everybody else. So what is John Lee Dumas said in the call with us last year, the niche of the podcast, the pregnant vegan yoga person, right? Now there's 1 million pregnancy podcasts, there's 1 million vegan, but when you put all those together into your own little creative niche, even in terms of community, you'll stand out and be the one that people count on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good stuff. Gustavo, I'd never heard of Creative Mornings before, but I'm looking at it right now. It looks great. Thank you.
Oh, it's massive. Yeah.
Gustavo's 4. All right. Dan.
Yeah, so going back to referrals, I was thinking about what about asking for referrals or introductions from the host of a podcast that you've been on? Do the same rules pretty much apply to what we talked about earlier?
I would flip it. I'd flip the way you're thinking. Who can you introduce them to? That's the way I'd be thinking. I think the questions you're asking today, I think you want to flip. If you know of a podcast that you like, this is going to change the way that you think. Oh, wait a second. Kent would be a great person for your podcast, and make that intro when you verify that it would be a good case, right? Now you get to bring them together, elevate it, and then 2 years from now, when you're at podcast movement and somebody goes, how do you guys know each other? Then they're like, oh, Dan introduced us. Who's Dan? It elevates your status. It's the opposite. So just consistently like, how do I get them to do this? The opposite. Gustavo.
Yeah, just do a little research. I just went on Raymond's website and I looked at every episode he just did. And I go, okay, he doesn't have a destination wedding photographer. I can introduce him to Kenny Kim. He doesn't have a branding gal, Wendy Yellowham. He doesn't have maybe a landscape guy that makes his money full time. That's Gary, so it's like Michelle Celentano. She'd be great intro. So there's my 4 intros I'm going to send him because that fits a need, maybe a need, but that fits something that he doesn't have. So trying to find and poke at the stuff that they probably don't even see because they're in it every day, right? But I see it partly because of my connections and partly because of my knowledge, I guess, too.
Your connections because of what you're doing, but think about what he's doing. Raymond, you get what, 20,000 downloads a month in your podcast, something like that?
30.
Oh, there you go. 30,000 downloads a month. Man, that's a nice introduction for one of Gustavo's friends to say, hey, you should know Raymond. I already know Raymond. This is why everything goes back to the powerful network. He knows Raymond. He trusts him. He heard this. He's listened to something. Same thing. Now bring them together. You've made both of your friends more successful. Your chance of getting on Raymond's show, if that's what you really wanted, has just elevated. And eventually you don't do it because you want to get on. That stuff just is going to happen. You do it because Gustavo's thinking, like that map that you did in the mastermind, right? About all your circle of influences around you, all the people that you can connect to different people. Gustavo, this is the way he thinks. And I think that's what we want to do.
Awesome. That was perfect. Thank you.
Keep it coming. I'm at a hotel, by the way. I got away from the kids for a night. I've been doing content, and I have 1 more hour, so this is cool. Kent.
I have been using on LinkedIn a strategy that I learned from Aaron about using really short videos just to connect with people, and it really works wonderfully. So this doesn't mean it always results in being on a podcast or even having a guest on my podcast, but as far as connecting, it really has been effective because people love those little short personal videos. Just saying, hey, or I noticed this one specific thing. I sent one to a friend of mine. He lives here in the area. He's a financial advisor with Edward Jones. And we've met for lunch before. So I just sent him a quick video and said, hey, I really loved your LinkedIn headline that you had. I love the way you framed it and stuff. And because nobody else is making, or very few people are making videos, it really stands out. And Aaron is like the master at this. So that to me has been really, really effective. And just building connections on LinkedIn.
Think of it this way. I can't remember if I've ever gotten a video message about the impact of my podcast. I don't think I've gotten personal messages. It's nice email today. Already got a bunch of emails, respond back, but I don't get very many video messages. I don't know if it matters, but you don't get it very often. So how do you stand out? Aaron's great at it.
Yeah, well,
I think it matters huge.
I just want to say I posted in the chat that actually goes back to Gustavo in 2018. So this just all circles back to him right now, it seems like.
And I love that you credit the source. That's the other thing. That is how you build more trust. Normally people write something. I am like on a path this last month because I'm bored and doing a whole lot less than I used to. When people start posting stuff online that's like a quote and they don't give credit, literally my comment is like, can you credit the source? I'm like, oh, I don't remember where I found it, blah, blah, blah. Like that is the ultimate credit the source when you use somebody's content. So Aaron, you didn't have to do that right there, but it's awesome. I mean, that was on a BAPA call, right? That Gustavo was on first where this first started.
It might have been one of my very first BAPA calls, to be honest with you. He might have been the first guest that I heard.
Yep. So I'm telling you that it all starts. That's why. So you get to that point, and I know what Gustavo does. I know his heart. That's why when I think of a podcast, I know he's going to be a great guest. I know he's going to be thorough, and I make the introductions, and I want to do that for everybody because you got to understand if you have that authority and friendship with people, you don't just throw it around willy-nilly just because people ask. You don't want the person introducing you to lose trust in their connection. Right? What else we got? Any general questions about how Kent?
Okay, this is just a general podcasting question. What is your opinion on? I'm not going to do this, by the way. I'm just asking. As a general podcast strategy, what do you think about shows that are now charging guests to be on their show?
I think it's interesting. I know Johnny Dumas does, and I think he dropped the price. I think it was $6,500 at one point.
My CEO was on his podcast, and he paid, and that's the first time I'd ever heard of it. I thought that was interesting.
How much did he pay?
If I remember correctly, it was a couple grand. It's like 2,500, 3,000, something like that.
And what do you think?
I mean, he paid it. He basically justified it into the marketing expenses.
No, I know, but what did he think about the results of paying to be on the podcast?
He's an impatient man, so I don't think he was totally like thrilled with it, but he just did it because he saw the reach that he had and just justified it through the reach. I don't think anything's come of it, but yeah, he's trying to sell a franchise, and not many people are going to John JLD's podcast to buy franchises necessarily, even though UPS advertises with him all the time.
You should be paying for Josh Brown's podcast, Franchise Euphoria. Kent, I haven't paid for anything. I haven't been asked to pay for anything. What makes you ask? I'm curious behind the question.
Okay, so here's why I'm asking that. I was on a podcast a while back called 5 Minutes to Success. Host is Karen Briscoe.
Yeah, I was on that. Yep.
Okay, yeah, really wonderful real estate lady. I think Rachel's been on there too, and probably some of the people from TLF. So I actually referred somebody from TLF to her as a guest a short while back. I said, this person would be great. She was on my show. 5 Minutes to Success is far bigger than my podcast. So when I recommended this person to Karen as a guest, Karen said she kind of wanted to find out more about this person. And she said she's now charging, if people ask to be a guest on her show, $250 just to cover the marketing expenses and the time she has to pay somebody to create the graphics and all that stuff. But it was interesting because in her mind, that was a way to weed out all the basically all the agencies who are now pitching podcast guests. And I've had people pitch me too, even though my show's fairly small. So I don't know. I can't decide in my mind if that somehow compromises the integrity of the show because somebody is paying to be on there. I don't know what I think about it.
That is the conundrum of it. I agree with why they're doing it.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but at the same time, if I'm listening to a podcast and I know it's organic and it's an organic reach and an organic connection, as opposed to like, are they paying for a commercial? Is that what we're paying for? So it's a legitimate question. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer because I do think, if it cuts down on the amount of pitches that they get and that just the amount of time they lose by responding to people or just the aggravation, I could see it. I know that was part of JLD's thing too because he's just pitched nonstop. All of a sudden they see it's $6,500, it slows down. And the people on it are a lot more serious, right?
Yeah.
They're a lot more serious. And yeah, it's a tough one, but $250 is like, I don't know.
Not much.
So I don't really have much of an answer except for I could see both sides to it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to this is that I was talking with another guy who's a financial coach, and we were talking about whether you should put prices on your website. And he's like, yes, because I charge premium prices, and if I put the minimum on there, it weeds a lot of people out, and I only get inquiries that are serious.
Yep.
And so for him, like it's a gateway to be like, I want to work with these people, and if you don't have this price, I just don't want to talk to you. Sorry. And so that's, yeah.
It generally comes down to where you are in business. When we started our photography business, we put our prices up, and every the way it went, we would go back and forth. When we were overloaded, we would put our minimum price because we didn't want to get so many increase. And then the problem for us was we love referring people out to other photographers. So when you put a low price, but it's still high, you're weeding out a lot of people, and I can't use that as a referral base anymore. I can't say, oh, Ken over here has got a great photographer. Like they're your style. They're a little cheaper, but they're going to do good because they're beginning. I can't do that because those people at the lower price range don't inquire. So we wound up keeping the prices off because we wanted any increase so we can build the network around it. Now, if that's not your purpose and it's too many, yeah, I totally get that. 100%. Aaron, you got any questions?
No, I honestly, I haven't started listening to the podcast part yet. I've been certain things that I've been focused on in April, but that's a May focus because what I have been doing is a daily live stream video. And I'm starting to have guests on for that now. And so it's just sort of the, I'm working on making sure I'm getting that sort of dialed in. And then those episodes are going to turn into podcast material. And it's why I had to jump off because it's every day at 11:30. So I had to go do my 15 or 18 minutes and then jump back on.
Okay. So you're going to pull that out eventually and create a podcast from this.
Yeah. So basically I'm taking all of the interviews and then sort of some of the best of solo episodes, and I'm just going to turn those into my podcast library. Not entirely unlike what I've done with my Instagram content, which is now feeding blog posts and LinkedIn content, and just sort of repurpose that. And I've been trying to focus on getting good audio quality, up front so that it'll double as a podcast. In fact, I'm using my podcast setup for the video and the audio, when I'm doing that.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Love it. See what happens? Look at the momentum you're getting here. This is beautiful. Yeah, audio sounds good. What else we got? James, any other questions? Raymond's saying no. Hoops, anything?
All right. Let's see. You guys hear me?
Yep.
You guys hear me? Yep. Just wanted to get some perspective. I want to get start gaining the momentum for this virtual training platform. So just kind of hearing some of these, I took a lot of notes on my phone and just, getting in touch with the right people, who it will help, who it will be good for.
Parents. Parents that want to get their kids, their kids are bouncing off walls, right?
Right.
I can't scroll through Facebook without some type of parent talking about their kid having too much energy. Like, geez, or they're not disciplined, or they realize, holy crap, like my teachers do a hell of a lot and I didn't realize how much they do, right? You're seeing a lot of that. That's a huge thing right there.
Nice job, Alex. For sure. All
right. So what are you thinking? What are you going to do?
I guess I just don't know again, I'm more like you. I don't want to ask, but I think just starting with connecting with people, finding out more about them, and then when the opportunity comes, tell them about what we're working on.
How are you in terms of your audio? Like, how will you do it in terms of like recording a podcast? Like, do you have a dedicated spot that you can go? Do you have the mic? Is that all set up?
Yeah. You did send a mic, and a lot of it is just the setup, and I have a pretty cheap laptop, so I don't know if it will support or be able to handle it. So I might look at upgrading that. I know it's not that's not a limiting belief. That's just facts. But again, I don't know if it's something that is on my heart to have a podcast. Sure, it would be great.
I'm thinking more like I just like who said it earlier. Like they got way more from being a guest than having their own. Like I think your message is vital for being a guest, and it's much faster too. Like here's the thing, everybody. I wish we said this earlier. If you start your own podcast, you need to build your audience from scratch. If you go to other people's, they've not only have they done the work, but they are spending money to promote it.
Right.
Like if you want to build a business, you're much wiser to be a podcast guest than be a podcast host.
Yeah. Well, it's like two people came from your daily podcast.
Okay.
Came from basically the principal of our son's school. I gave them the same offer. That went out last night. I have 2 already today. And those are people that already know me.
But so I do a 5-minute podcast about you guys in terms of reinvention, and 2 people sign up from it, right? Mm-hmm. And that wasn't even your target audience. What if you start talking about these same things to other audiences? It will do everything you needed to do.
Right.
As I'm sitting here right now, I want to just poke myself in the leg with a pen that I'm not just like doing 10 guests a week. because there's nothing that's added more value and bottom line growth and time efficiency than guesting on podcasts. And people might not sign up directly, but when they hear you 16 different times in different stories and all these people that they wind up wanting to be a part of it.
Well, and the program will only get better with time. Right now, we just have 10 videos out there.
Yeah.
It's like when we are able to add more, it will get even better.
So by the time that you get on a certain show and it actually gets published, you'll have 30.
I'm going to move so I'm not fighting Juan over sound here.
Juan. But
teaching class.
But I think, does anybody else see it? You know, Gustavo, you heard Hoops at the retreat the first time, right? You saw what he has. Don't you think this is an all-in situation to try to get the word out more?
Well, he is all in right now, which is the beautiful thing that I'm sort of loving. So
right? He has to.
You just got pushed into a corner real hard.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, but here is the thing, though. This is, I think, that I don't think you'll get this experience online.
That's fine. I know, and you're attached to it, right? Because you know it, but it doesn't mean you're replicating that experience. It's only going to make the experience there more valuable, but it doesn't mean it can't be another level to what you do. I think if you get hung up on replicating it, you're never going to do it well.
Sure.
That's why we had different. Like, you can go to a Twins game, you're not going to have the same experience in section 536, row ZZ, as you are in the box seats. But it's still an option for the person that can't pay for the box seats.
Yeah. True.
And actually take the baseball analogy even further. Most of the revenue from the teams doesn't come from the people coming into the stadium, right? It's from the reach that they have outside of their immediate market. And that's what I'm hearing for you is that, you know, you have the opportunity to serve people across the world potentially that would never make it to where you are physically. But then for your best core customers, they're going to pay for the premium product and come see you in person once this is all done.
For sure.
And your only, absolutely, and your only problem is people don't know about you. You know, Andy Andrews said it really well. The best book ever written is in somebody's drawer. We don't know it because they never published it. But it's better than every other book we've read. And it's the same thing here. And you're just going to get better with it, right? You're just going to get better by doing it. But people need to know about what people outside of your area. You've done a real good job of letting people inside your area know about it. But you have the potential for anybody to be a part of this. And how much different would your business be if the income coming in from that made everything else irrelevant? What could you do differently?
Well, I mean, right. It's more. It's not the peace of mind, but it's that. It's the passive income, you know, and it's. I know that doesn't really exist. Like, you know, we worked our ass off the first 2 weeks to get this out there and ready, but now it's like it will create a nice barrier and a nice cushion that will allow our future growth to happen sooner than, you know, worrying about where we move next. You know what I mean?
Totally. It exists over time. Maybe it's not totally passive, but over time, I'll say it's not passive, but it's easier. It's easier income. And what if the online academy paid for everything that you have? What if it paid for the place? What if it paid for the mats, all that stuff? What if it paid for it? What could you do differently? Could you hire different help that frees you up so you can sleep better? Your people get paid better. You know, that's where I want you to think. That's why this is so important to get it out to more people.
Right. True.
And I think just to add quickly to that is it's okay to deliver value that may not be as valuable as your top thing, but that's okay. Example, my CrossFit gym, obviously we can't go, but before everything locked down here in Florida, they let us just take equipment. They're like, sign this waiver, here's what you're checking out. And now I have equipment in my garage. I can still do CrossFit workouts. They still do workouts on Zoom. And of course, I have not given up my membership. I still pay the monthly fee. Is it as good as going to the gym and doing everything in person? Of course not, but it is what it is. And so, yeah, delivering value, it's not as good as maybe you want it to be, but it's still valuable. You can still help people. It just might be a different price point.
Totally.
That's what this time has taught us, because it's taken away, like for like my gym where I go and work out is closed. So that, like that takes that away from me. We have people that were coming 3-4 times a week that haven't done one online class because it's like, no, it's not the same. I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
Have kids that were coming once a week that are logging 5 classes a week because they don't have anything better to do.
That's exactly. And you're going to start figuring before. Yep, and you're going to start figuring that out in terms of where people shift. This is a major shift for so many of us. And it's just, where do you come out on the side of it, right? You can have, this is for you're going to find people that were in-person people that turn out to be online people more because you gave them an option they didn't have before. And you're going to have in-person people that are absolutely not online people and they are more committed to the in-person. And then you'll have people that will drop because things change.
Well, it's the same. I think with homeschooling, I think a lot of families won't go back after this when they
agree.
It's not that it's easy. It's just that it's an opportunity they didn't know that they had.
Why do you think we're going all in on that? We're hearing it the first week. People were like, this is crazy. This is insane. Now it's like, my kid's playing piano. That was Bill Cummins. Jared, his daughter started reading. She never read without them coercing her to. So like their kids are sleeping in longer and they're not being bullied and all these things that they never had the option to. I'm not against school, but I just know that we can, what we do, and people just never been exposed to it. And they say, oh, I could never have done that. Now they have to.
Well, it's like we were talking the pro empowerment, right? It's not that you're anti-school, it's that you're for creating good adults. And that won't always happen through the traditional platforms.
And hopefully this makes school better. Hopefully this forces them to realize everything we're doing maybe wasn't the best because we just followed along. That's, to me, it's my thing to carry right now because it's an opportunity, just like you. Ken, I want to ask Ken a question before we go. You have to be following the world of colleges and what's going on right now. Like, what is the what is the vibe?
Well, I work at it in my day job. I work at a small school in North St. Louis. And of course, like every other school, we've sent our students home. We did that about a month ago. We're doing all our stuff on Zoom. All of our teachers have had to reconfigure all of our classes, which some people embrace that. Some people hate that. Some students embrace it. Some students hate it. I think it's going to be the exact same thing that we're talking about. It's going to reinforce to some people that they love in-person learning.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, it's going to open up all these opportunities. But on the whole, I think this is really going to be bad for schools.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, okay, so my son just turned 16 last week. If I had an 18-year-old, I would be pretty leery about sending him away to a school now, living in all these rancid dorms and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That would make me really nervous. So I think this is going to be really tough for teachers. And I have thought many times about there's a huge market there for probably somebody like me to take what I know and help university professors, college professors develop an online business. The only problem is that people in education typically are not very business minded.
No.
Speaking from my own experience. So that almost feels like kind of a losing direction.
I don't know. You've got a beginner market there that you can nurture.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? Sit in their basement? Or are they going to actually eventually want to learn? Like when there's enough pain, you figure something out. I think this is going to change. If this goes on, this is going to change. I was just about to record a podcast, but I didn't have enough time before this call started. What happens if people don't go back to school for a year, right? Just what happens?
Yep.
18-year-olds are forced to work, right? Some people lose their jobs. Those people will come up with new things. What happens when those 18-year-olds start actually making money and learning life skills? Will they want to go back? Will parents want them? Maybe life's going to starting a little bit earlier than it used to.
Exactly.
And like it used to be, we've prolonged childhood way longer. And I'm not ripping on colleges, but we kind of have.
Mm-hmm.
And
I totally agree.
So with people jumping into and like, wait a second, my kid's making money. Parents, think about it. You're a parent. Wait a second, you're making $28,000 a year instead of me spending $34,000. Wait a second, maybe we should keep going down this road a little bit longer, right? Oh, maybe you could buy a house sooner. Maybe you get married sooner. Maybe you figure problems out sooner. I think the colleges are shaking in their boots right now because they have.
Oh, they are. They are. It's terrifying for most people because it's exposing all of the weaknesses of traditional education. It's really expensive. It's sometimes not very effective. The degrees don't actually get you a real job sometimes. So it's all kinds of problems that we know about. But this whole thing is going to expose all that, which I think is good. I think it's going to be very good for the higher education industry in the long term. Right now, it's going to be really painful.
Yep.
But it's interesting how many conversations I've had with even our own schools, adjunct instructors. My secret ploy the past couple of years has been to get them involved in freelance writing and working with clients and just saying, why are you working for pennies for these schools teaching these crazy online courses when you could be working with clients?
Yeah.
This is insane. But it's a mindset shift. A lot of them just don't get it.
No, but because they haven't needed to get it.
They're going to now.
Yeah, they're going. And that's just like with hoops, right? Like you're forced into it, you figure things out. Hoops, go ahead.
I have a really good friend who I think, and he's a morning show host, and I think he's one of the best ad copywriters around. But he's stuck probably making 40, 50K a year, and he's got to get up at 3:00 every morning and work his ass off. I was like, dude, you could be doing copywriting. Like, it's hilarious because he takes it to the next level. Like he won't be excited about doing another spot for Comcast, so he'll just make it terrible. Or there's a local real estate guy, and he just rips on him. But his ads are so good.
He should know. You would connect him and Kent. They need to know each other.
Yeah,
they need to know each other.
Love to connect with him.
Josh Bitney.
There you go. No, I think I was curious about what you thought. I've been thinking about this for about a week. I want to ask you, like, what that world is. It's going to be bizarre if it doesn't.
I really, I don't mean to be grandiose about this, but I almost feel like a calling to help. I don't want to focus on college teachers because that's an audience that typically doesn't have any money to spend and all that stuff. But
wait, hold on. Let's just pause there for a second.
Okay.
Just pause on that for a second before you send your kid to college. Let's just think for a second. I'm not focused on the college professionals because they tend to have no money. Am I going to spend $150,000 to send my kid to a school where the people teaching have no money?
Yeah,
that doesn't make
they're
much
stressed
sense.
out.
It makes no sense.
Trust me, from the perspective of somebody who's been a college teacher for a long time, all of us who teach college, and probably a lot of high school too, but all of us who teach in colleges, universities, grad schools, we just want to teach. We don't want to deal with all the government regulations, accreditation, garbage, and all the committees and all that stuff. So faculty are so stressed out, we can't teach well because we've got so much other garbage to do.
No, I get that, but from the perspective of the consumer, I want to learn from somebody. Like, what's the saying? Like, I don't want to take advice from somebody I wouldn't trade places with.
Exactly. So, like when you have a business school where teachers are talking about being an entrepreneur, I'm always like, well, why are you teaching? Because you're not making very much money. This doesn't make any sense to me.
You'd be out making money as an entrepreneur.
Exactly. Unless you're an adjunct and you just really enjoy doing that on the side. That's different.
Which I get. I get. But I think it's just shining a light on something where a light has. I'm not saying right or wrong, but it's exposing a lot of things, which I think is beautiful.
It is.
All right. Well, I got to check out before they kick me out of here. I think I'm the only one in the hotel. I'm telling you, go get a hotel. You can own it. They'll bring you a bag breakfast. It's perfect. They'll wear gloves.
Like Monopoly.
Right? It's true. I'm like, can I have the 3rd, 6th, and 4th floor, please? And I'll just run back and forth.
Park Place, bro. You're set.
That's right. No joke. Elizabeth knew I needed to get out. She called to get the room, and she's like, can we do an early check-in? And they literally said, what time you want to come in? There's nobody here. I'm like, yes, that's my kind of hotel. I love it. So, great call, everybody. Get your wins and goals ready for tomorrow. All right.
I'll catch up on the 20 minutes I missed. See you guys.
All right. See you.
Thanks.
Bye.